I didn't want to do it, but I thought, you know what, let me go ahead and give it a shot and go do my best. And then I went to go do it.
Who was originally cast?
It was Michael Jai White.
Wow, that's funny.
Yeah.
Hey guys, this is part one of my video interview with Ron Hall, who played Cliff in Bloodsport 2, was in a series of films with Dale Apollo Cook, former kickboxer, and then also directed, wrote, and starred in the infamous Vampire Assassin. But anyway, in this video, we're really going to talk about Bloodsport 2, give you some secrets behind that. But first, just to start off, kind of get into Ron's history on why and how he got into martial arts and how that led to film and eventually Bloodsport 2. Anyway, if you like this kind of content, please help support the channel by hitting the like button, subscribing, and sharing the video. All right, let's just start at the beginning. Let's just start martial arts and then how that eventually got you into martial arts films.
Sure. When I was a little kid, I guess my first exposure to martial arts was I saw Bruce Lee's show Marlowe on television, and it just changed my world. A guy that was so powerful, so fast. It just was fascinating. And I didn't know what it was, didn't know who it was. But maybe about a year or two later, my friend Herb, his father, took me, my brother, and him to go see Fist of Fury and Lady Kung Fu. And when I walked out of the movie theater, I was transformed. It was like martial arts was like the most amazing thing that I'd ever seen.
Sure.
So I used to live in a neighborhood that was between two large projects in Washington, D.C. the place is called Kenilworth Courts. It was notorious for crime. And I was a very smart kid, and kids used to chase me home from school. They used to chase me home from school so much that every teacher in the school gave me a ride home at least one time.
Oh, wow.
And they were building a rec center like in this park near where we lived. And my teacher, Miss Richardson, was like, Ronald Hall, you need to go take karate.
You need karate lessons, man. That way nobody will mess with you.
Okay, so me, my brother, all my friends, we all took karate like en masse. And I was the worst. In fact, I was so bad, they used to call me Super Sorry. It was
Really?
like we had karate teams, everybody picked me last. And, I had no speed, no power, no nothing. But what I had was the ability to kind of get the basic things. And, everybody was blue belts and brown belts and about to be black belts. And I was still like a white belt or a green belt.
Ron, I would have guessed you had a natural talent for it because you're so athletic and acrobatic and your moves are so clean, like in the movies, especially compared to like a lot of the other guys. So I would just assume or guess you had a natural athletic talent for it, but it sounds like it was quite the opposite.
No, it was something I developed, and it was pretty funny because I can remember my brother was always like the martial arts superstar. And then all of a sudden, in a couple of years, I started to overtake him in ability.
Oh.
And so then at that time, I started to take Kung Fu in Washington, D.C., actually from Dennis Brown and Willie Lynn. They had a wushu school near where I lived. And when I was taking it, it was very different because it was nothing like the Kung Fu I saw in movies. We got in stances, we held the stance for like a half an hour. We did like 2 or 3 moves, and that was all we practiced. And it was nothing like what I saw.
Yeah, no Bruce Lee type stuff.
Right. But what I learned there is the importance of technique, form, being able to go from one move to another, the flow of, interchanging movements. I learned all that like in Shaolin Wushu from Dennis Brown and Willie Lynn. And so going to the movies, I always in the back of my mind, I had an idea to go in movies, but it was like an impossible dream because nobody I knew was in movies. It was so remote. I'm in Washington, D.C., the movie theaters across the country. However, George Chung, Taekwondo champion, and Chuck Jeffries were doing movies with Leo Fall.
Okay.
And they had a seminar, how to get into movies. And so
wow, they actually had a seminar about that. That's interesting.
Yeah, they had a seminar, how to get in movies. They showed one of their movies, and then the next day they taught us like things that we needed to know and stuff like that. And I was on them. I was hounding them. I was after Chuck, and me and Chuck have an interesting relationship because me and Chuck Jeffries took Kung Fu from the same guy, and we went to the same high school.
Okay.
Chuck was a little bit older than me, and he was always like kind of one of my heroes because he was doing movies, he was doing television, and I wanted to do what Chuck was doing. So, years later, after that seminar, I just made up my mind that it was just something I really wanted, that my life would not be right had I not pursued martial art movies. So
Yeah, Ron, it's funny. So many of us, especially like in an earlier era, even the era when I grew up, they didn't have like the UFC or anything. So it was more like if you want to do something with martial arts, either open up your own school or you get in the movies. I mean, granted, they did have some fighting, right, with like Don Wilson, Benny the Jet Urquidez, great fighters, but kickboxing wasn't really popular like in America. They were building it, but it never gained that like huge popularity. So it was either like if you wanted to do something with your martial arts, you almost had to go to the movies, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So when I came to California, I basically, I had worked in corporate America. I worked in bank, insurance, restaurants, and stuff like that. So I looked at it as though I was the product, and all I had to do was market it.
Okay,
And
yeah,
I used that approach in about 9 months to get into films. I actually, what happened was they had the AFM. They have it usually once a year where filmmakers go and associate to see if they can get into movies. And what I did is I had 15 videotapes, and I left them that night when everybody was gone. I left them outside of the doors of different companies. And the next morning, 3 companies called me. One of them was a company in Hong Kong called Davian. They were doing movies at that time with Dale Apollo Cook, and they wanted me to go to Philippines to do some movies with Dale. And the other one was Mark DeSalle, who made movies with Van Damme and Jeff Speakman.
of course.
And the interesting with Mark DeSalle, he told me that they see people all the time that they thought I had kind of like a unique ability in that I was a really good kicker, which Van Damme specialized in, and I was good with my hands, which Jeff Speakman specialized in. Plus, I could do an added thing that neither one of them could do, which were acrobats.
There you go.
So I was an acrobatic. So they said, we can make you like the Michael Jordan of martial art movies. And I was like,
trifecta you had, man. You had all 3 things.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Wow. So what happened? So obviously you went with Mark DeSalle instead of the other company, right?
Actually, I did both.
You did both.
Both. Yeah, I went to Mark. Mark was pretty reasonable. I went to him and said, I've never starred in a movie before, and they're going to pay me, give me a starring role. So maybe I could do this role to practice, how to do what I'm going to do later for your movies. And he agreed. So he allowed me to go to Hong Kong and to, do a movie. And, it was a great experience. Dale Cook was very professional, a lot of fun. I loved Dale. We had an interesting relationship because Dale was the kickboxing champion and I was the movie martial art guy.
Sure.
So, people would always try to foster some animosity, but me and Dale, we were cool. It never was a problem to us. It was only a problem to people around us. Mm. And, Dale, if you talk to Dale, Dale respected my ability to do martial art movies, just like I respected his ability to be a kickboxer. So we had a really good relationship doing those 3 movies that we worked together.
Did you? Okay, so wow, 3 movies. Did you do them all in the Philippines, like back to back?
No, we would do like one a year.
You do like one a year, all in the Philippines, though?
Yep, we would go. Well, one was Thailand, so we would go home. We'd do a movie, take about 2 or 3 months, and then we'd go back home, and then they'd call me like a year later and say, hey, we're going to do another movie. And then, and at the same time, I was waiting to do a movie with Mark DeSalle.
Yeah, with you as the lead, right?
Yes.
That's awesome. Wow. So whatever happened with that then?
Well, I guess what happened was Mark's relationship with whoever was funding the movie, this happens all the time in Hollywood. Somebody's going to make a movie, then it goes into turnaround. So that's what happened. It went into turnaround. My contract was up, and I had to look for other work. So, I started to work on other films.
Ron, can you explain turnaround for the audience?
Yeah, turnaround is when a studio or production company has a project that they no longer believe in or maybe no longer want. And so it has to find another home, and maybe it finds another studio or production company to continue the development of that project.
Let me ask you this. Did Mark DeSalle have a specific finished script for you as the lead, or did it not even get that far?
Yes.
He had a finished script.
Sure, I still have it. Yeah.
You still have it? Like,
yeah.
Is it
good?
It
was called Home Turf. And it was basically about a guy coming from the Afghanistan war, comes back to his neighborhood, which is infested by drugs, and you know, he goes up against the drug dealers.
Okay, so kind of similar to Marked for Death, right? With
Sure.
Seagal coming back from South America and then going against the drug dealers, right?
It probably could have been the same movie with a different cover page.
Yeah, sure. A lot of these movies are pretty similar, but that would have been awesome for you to be in, because Mark DeSelle's movies, he was working with, I think, Paramount, right?
Right.
They would have had a bigger budget and more, you know, established filmmakers compared to stuff they would have shot with, you know, in the Philippines with the other companies. So, wow.
Yeah.
But you still have the script. Maybe they still make that someday.
Maybe.
Yeah.
You know, Mark understood the audience. I mean, when I would talk to Mark, he really understood about martial art movies and the appeal of martial art movies and what the audience wanted.
I heard you can get killed at that Kumite.
Only if you fuck up.
More so than a lot of other producers that, you know, I've met or talked with and stuff like that. So that's probably why he was so successful at it.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, what is he connected to? Bloodsport, Kickboxer, The Perfect Weapon, just to name a few. Like these are movies people talk about all the time. Very high quality martial arts films.
Right.
Yeah. And then, okay, so the Mark DeSalle thing never quite worked out. Was there a discussion where he just dropped you as like, let you know we can't do this movie, nothing's gonna happen, or did that discussion never?
Yeah, well, what ended up happening was he called me to the office one day, and I went and he said, "Hey, Ron, you know, we're not going to do home turf anymore. You know, a lot of problems with that. What we want to do is we want to do Bloodsport 2, and we're going to make it kind of like Lethal Weapon. Okay. We've got another guy, you know, and he's a fabulous martial artist, and we're going to pair you guys up, and you're going to go in the Kumite together." So
wow. I didn't know Mark DeSalle was associated with Bloodsport 2. So he basically got you into Bloodsport 2.
Yes.
That's cool.
But what happened was Bloodsport 2 changed hands, and the people, when they changed hands, they no longer want to be as a part of Bloodsport 2.
Oh, they didn't want you in it at all.
No. Actually, what happened was there's a director who shall remain nameless. He thought I was too small to fight Daniel Bernhardt.
Just out of curiosity, how tall are you?
I'm 5'11".
You're 5, and Daniel Bernhardt's probably what, 6'1" or something?
I about like 6'1", 6'2".
Yeah, it's only 2 inches. Can't even tell on screen with 2 inches. That's weird. And you're like an athletic guy. It's not like you're a skinny dude, you know?
Yeah, and I think I gave Daniel some of his best fights in movies. So
yeah, that was an amazing fight scene, of course.
Don't hold back, Cliff. No favors, Alex.
And you guys were like cool after the fight in the movie, right? You even said, "Hey, good fight." So
yeah, me and Daniel used to be like brothers. So either, you know, on the film, you know, and off the film. So yeah.
Well, the thing is, so if this new director guy didn't want you in it, you still ended up in it. Like, how did you end up getting in it anyway?
Well, they called me at the last minute. You know, they called me at the last minute. You know, they were already shooting the movie, and the person that they had cast in that role had went off to do another movie. And you know, I didn't want to do it, but I thought, you know what, let me go ahead and give it a shot and go do my best. And you know, and then I went to go do it.
Who was originally cast?
It was Michael Jai White.
Wow, that's funny.
Yeah, but Michael Jai White had gotten the Mike Tyson movie at that time, so he turned down Bloodsport and went to do the Mike Tyson movie.
And it seemed like a smart move, because he would have obviously had the lead in the Tyson movie, but a smaller but still substantial role in Bloodsport 2.
Yeah.
That you ended up getting. Okay, so you just did that last minute. And then, yeah, can you talk about some of your experiences on there? Because again, you're that fighter. You know, the funny thing is, this all relates to how we basically met, because coincidentally, I was doing research on Bloodsport 2 because I was going to do a video series like who all the fighters in Bloodsport 2, similar to how I did it on the first one. Right. And when I was rewatching the movie, like, you really stood out. And, you know, when I was talking to Gary Amon just one day, he mentioned Ron Hall. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, Ron Hall from Bloodsport 2. It's like, oh, yeah. He's like, yeah, he's my good buddy. I was like, I could get you on the phone with him. And I was like, yeah, put him on the phone. And then we got to meet, you know, so just very coincidental. But yeah, can you describe some of the experiences? Like, did you choreograph the fights yourself, or like how those play out?
Philip Tan was the basically second unit director, fight choreographer, and in a lot of instances, he directed the movie.
Okay.
You know, they left most people up to their own devices, meaning that you developed your fight and then you ran it in front of Phil and he, you know, guided you on what he wanted you to see. I'm gonna give you an example. This is funny, was the backflip that people ask me about all the time was something I didn't want to do. I thought it sounded corny when he said it to me. And, you know, I did it about 20 times to get it right. But, you know, he knew what he was talking about. His instincts was correct.
Just the one when the guy's doing all these moves to try to intimidate you, you smile at him, and then you just do that backflip.
Yes.
Yeah, that's quite memorable. It's quite memorable. It's funny because in a lot of movies, they've actually did the opposite. Like, for example, in Never Back Down, you have this really flashy guy doing these flips, and the guy just, like, you know, uppercuts him or something, you know?
Right,
it's almost like the opposite.
Sure.
But yeah, either way, those are memorable. You have the flashy guy, he just gets knocked out by basic technique, or you have a guy doing all this stuff and you just like boom, backflip him. Funny stuff.
And you know, there were a lot of martial artists, a lot of really talented. You know, Gokor, who now trains a lot of the UFC and the MMA champions, was in the movie. You know, Daniel went off to do his career. They had a lot of really talented people in Bloodsport too.
How long did you guys have to like film the fight? So you were in like, let's see, probably about, I think at least 4 fights, right?
Yeah.
How many days did you have to like shoot each fight?
No, not days. There's been a strange thing in my career that's always happened, which is basically it'll be a day where they say, hey, Ron, we want this incredible action scene. We want you to do this, that, this, and that. And I go, okay. And I plan it all out. And then they take all day setting up the lighting or shooting somebody else. And then they come to me and say, hey, okay, Ron, we got 2 hours left. What can you do? And that's pretty much most of the fights that I've done in movies.
2 hours?
Generally, on average, about 2 hours. It's basically get in there, do, you know, and I know, you know, my experience, you know, I picked up how to use the camera because when you choreograph a fight, you're choreographing it. First of all, it's entertainment. You're trying to entertain people with the spirit of fighting. There's a lot of things that, you know, when you put that video out the other day, there were a few people who basically were saying, like, I'm a movie martial artist. No, I'm a martial artist who works in movies, meaning that I have all the fundamentals of a martial artist. You know, I have the speed, the power, the technique, and anybody who knows martial arts really understands that. That's why a lot of guys who are like considered masters really give me a lot of respect because they can look at my command of my martial art.
Oh, sure.
As opposed to some guy who thinks I'm doing all that because I'm in a movie might be dismissive of it.
But the weird ironic thing is it's you're in a movie, so you're doing stuff that is more cinematic that you wouldn't do if you were getting mugged in an alley. That the whole point is it's gotta be exciting and cinematic because it is a movie. So I don't understand some of those comments, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. You know, I get it. You know, people think, you know, people kind of shortchange themselves when they believe that fighting is the only aspect of martial arts. I mean, martial arts is really about self-development, about you challenging yourself to exceed your physical or mental limits. And fighting is a byproduct of that. It's not for some people, it's the goal. Mm-hmm. But for people who really understand martial arts, it's a byproduct of that goal. You know, if you talk about, perfect example is Mike Tyson now. You can see how Mike Tyson has become kind of like this philosophical guru.
Sure.
But he was once a killing machine.
Oh, yeah.
And so he's grown from that killing machine to really understand the power of his boxing. And most martial artists who continue on that path, they kind of mostly do that. People who just, you know, there are very few martial artists to say, you know, I just want to fight, and only thing I want to do is fight. There are many other aspects about martial arts: movement, motion, breathing, stretching, you know, how you conduct yourself in life, how you interact with people, how you interact with people who try to attack you. You know, all these things in martial arts come from a place of self-development to make your character a better character, to make you a better character.
Yeah, exactly. Self-expression too. I did a whole video about why people train martial arts, and you got to train it for your own reason, not for somebody else's, right? Because I get what you're saying. People just associate it with fighting. It's like, well, that's one thing, and you could technically use it for self-defense, but that's not a reason why a lot of people even train. It would be great if you can defend yourself with those techniques, but there's so many other reasons why people train. In fact, I've been able to diffuse situations just by having awareness and winning those like so-called conflicts without getting in trouble, without getting hurt, without hurting the other person, without legal repercussions, in a much smarter way. That to me is being a true martial artist, not just, oh, I bashed that dude's head in. It's like, well, I mean, worst case scenario, absolute last resort, sure, it should go to physical violence, but if you could not have it go there, that's the ideal outcome, right, for everybody involved.
Yeah.
That's what I think a real martial artist should strive to do.
Yeah.
But people confuse it with the sport too, and that's a whole other thing, because those guys are specifically training for the sport, for the glory, for the competition. But let's talk about, okay, so Bloodsport 2 was amazing, and you barely got to shoot your scenes, right? Because they were like, you said like 2 hours, which is ridiculous. But when they're setting up the lighting though, because I know in the first Bloodsport, the cinematographer David Worth talked about how they built the lighting into the kumite set, so they didn't have to set it up each time. They could just kind of move the cameras around and shoot. Now on Bloodsport 2, did they do that as well, or did they actually have to do different setups for different angles?
Yeah, they had to do a lot of different setups.
They did. Interesting. So a little bit different and more time consuming, it sounds like.
Sure. Yeah.
So after Bloodsport 2, though, what'd you go on to do?
In part 2 of my interview with Ron, we're going to talk about his continued journey into the martial arts film world, working on a practically no-budget film, also an exciting project he's got coming up soon, and more.